to all the farms. Please invite me to visit you. See names that I've never seen before. Hi,
Sure.
Martha.
Hi, Liz.
How are you?
Say, come back anytime.
Thank you.
So yes, please keep sharing in the chat. Thank you again for joining us. Welcome to the ABCs of NRCS funding, where you'll learn about NRCS programs that can help fund high tunnels, among other things. I'm going to introduce myself and our guest today. My name is Claudia Navas, and I use she, her pronouns. I am a project manager at Farm School NYC. And maybe just if you could use a thumbs up to let me know if you've heard of Farm School. You can use a little, okay. Yeah, got a lot of folks from New York City. For those of you who are not familiar with Farm School, it is a sustainable agriculture and urban agriculture training program rooted in Black, Indigenous, people of color land stewardship. My role in Farm School is to partner with NRCS as a service to BIPOC growers in New York City. Though for this session, the information should be transferable to any city or rural area even, especially since every state has an NRCS office. But what is NRCS? It stands for Natural Resources Conservation Service, and it's a primary federal agency that helps plan and implement conservation practices that address natural resource concerns or opportunities to help save energy, to improve the soil, water, plants, air, and other related resources on agricultural lands. There might be a alphabet soup of acronyms this evening, so I will try my best to share those in the chat, share what they mean. So the first one, NRCS, is Natural Resource Conservation Service, and I'll put that in the chat right now.
We love acronyms. And even for us, we get confused sometimes. So many.
We'll also be collecting questions in the chat for the Q&A at the end. So if you think of a question and you don't want to forget it, please just put it in the chat. My colleague, Jazz, who's with us there, will be compiling these questions for us. So thank you, Jazz. And now I want to introduce our guest speakers. We have two today. Liz Camps, who works for the New York NRCS office, and Aleyna Rodriguez, who's a farmer at Garden of Happiness. So I'll let Liz take it away, and then later on, Elena, you can share your experience.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to be here, and I want to say thank you so much to Claudia for putting this session together, because I know it's a lot of confusion when it comes to our programs. They are not difficult when it comes to the farmer applying to the programs. It's more the confusion comes when we start to explaining how we do it. And that's the part that sometimes I leave, like, I don't explain it much because we do a lot of stuff behind the scenes. But with this presentation, I'm going to focus more on high tunnels, but I'm also going to include some more other practices that I know I'm being asked a lot in urban scenarios. So, oh, let me just put in. So starting with how, just 1 second. So when we do a site visit for high tunnels, we always look at the landscape. Can we do this practice in this farm? So most of the, well, all of the high tunnels have to be installed in a slope that is between 0 and 5%. And that is because of erosion. We can't encourage issues. So, because the idea of our programs is to resolve issues, resolve resource concerns, which what we call resource concerns is erosion, air quality, plant health issues, those things we call resource concerns. So when we plan, we have to make sure that we are not increasing any issues. So everything, we have to improve everything. So the style that we recommend for the high tunnels is Gothic style, and it's because we get snow in the state, and it's the most, it's just the most, like the strongest of them designs. Also has to be a 6 feet minimum peak, and I hope you can see my arrow here. So the peak of the high tunnel is right here. That has to be 6 feet or more. Believe the highest I've seen is like 17 feet in between, or 20 feet. And that is, and the reason of that is because we don't cost share the Caterpillar tunnels. And I get that question asked all the time. So no, we don't cost share the Caterpillars. So it has to be a regular high tunnel. It could be pipe, it could be aluminum, steel, or wood. So any one that you choose that will meet any of our specifications should be fine. Another concern that I get a lot is the 15 to 25 feet on all sides of the high tunnel. And I know urban lands are very small, so it's hard to put those that many feet aside, but I can work with you on this. Because sometimes there are ways that you can, instead of putting grass, you can do perennial crops that you will not remove, and that will help for the infiltration. The idea is that you leave enough space for the snow when it falls, and also that you're covering the land. It can be bare soil. 6 mil plastic and UV resistant. This is because the plastic should last 4 years. And some people try to sell you 3 mil, but 3 mil doesn't last more than 2 years, and it can puncture very easily. The end post should be between 12 and 14 gauge. Most kits will come like that when you ask for a snow load, and they have to do it because they have to sustain the pressure of the snow. And all the crops have to be grown in natural soil. We cannot have benches, any like raised beds, even if it's open on the bottom, that is not allowed. Maybe in the future, that's something that could happen. But as of this year, we are not allowed to do anything with benches or anything like that. You can have a raised bed, and right now it's 12 inches in the standard. And I believe they're trying to review this and make it bigger, but for now it's 12 inches. On the bottom, I have a few links for you. We have a website that is called the Field Office Technical Guide that includes all our standards. And this is an example of one of our standards. Every time we put a practice in a conservation plan, we attach all these forms to the plan to make sure the person understands what we're expecting from the practice when it's installed. So this is one of the urban high tunnels that we install. We call 3 seasons because you have to remove the plastic at the end of the season. This is why we don't pretty much do them, because nobody wants to remove the plastic and no one wants to put it back. So it just stays without plastic. So it defeats the purpose of having a high tunnel. But this is the curved one is cheaper, but the truth is it's just going to give you more headaches, but it's an option if you ever want to remove the plastic. This is a recent one that we did last year, and it's a mix between wood and aluminum pipes, aluminum like steel pipes. And this is the Gothic style that we love, and it's the best one for New York. It has all the wind posts on the sides, and I'm sorry that I couldn't include a picture of the sides. I thought I had them all, but there's a brace that goes in this section here that is for wind. So very windy areas should have those braces. And here you can see also the space between the high tunnels where it shows that it is grass. Let's see. All right, so for cover crops, I have not seen many people doing cover crops in urban scenarios, so I had to include some of the ones that I do out east. but also this one my soil scientist gave me today. This is a good example of cover crop. The only issue that we see in that picture is that it is very thick. It doesn't have to be that, like, it looks like a carpet. So doesn't have to be that way, but it's possible. I just want to show that it's possible to do cover crops under NRCS programs. And you can also, this is a veg mix with sorghum and crimson clover. So irrigation systems. These are the ones that some people get kind of flustered about them because it just has too many components. But it's not as difficult when we go through the process. We will provide the person a design. We will make sure that it fits the farm. We will never give you something that will not fit the purpose of what we're trying to achieve. So when we do the inspection for these ones, we have to look at the pipes, and that's why I put one on the top with the labels, and the same with the drip lines. We have to look at all these things. Some people just go install them and cover everything, and that makes it really hard for us to find out what's going on, because we have to make sure the depth of the pipe is correct, that the lines were installed properly, that the size of the pipes were installed properly. So this is one of the practices that we can definitely cost share, and we will help you design it and everything. So NRCS funding, right now I'm just gonna show you, and this list only shows you the AMA practices, which is the Agricultural Management Assistance Program. But we also have the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, which is EQIP. What is the difference? AMA is only now for urbans. We took that funding and only allocated it for urban farms. So you don't have to compete with the rest of the state. And that's great, because usually what we have is like 200 applications, and then everybody else in the small farms have to compete towards those, and that's under EQIP. So that's why we separated to AMA. For small high tunnels, we pay more money because of the square footage. Like usually when you go and buy a high tunnel, it's about $4,000, $5,000. So the prices change to allow us to do that. So we have this one, a small one, that is just a small high tunnel, snow and wind. It's pretty much the same as the other one that we cost share here, but here you can see the differences. So for the small one, which it applies more to urban areas, is 600 square feet or less. And for the regular one that we usually cost sharing in bigger lands, and I want to show that because some of you do have a lot of land, the biggest one you can get is 30 by 96. And that's 28,880. That's the biggest high tunnel I've ever seen. With the high tunnels, also we have to implement the grass that I mentioned to you on the side. So after you do the high tunnel, it creates a lot of disturbance. So you do have to seed. It doesn't, it's hard to go around it. So before you get ready to plant anything perennial on the sides, you do have to put grass so we can certify the practice. And there's no erosion in the during the certification. I'm also showing you here the pipeline. So when it comes to irrigation systems, the pipeline is always paid separately. And then the micro irrigation system, which is the drip lines here, would include your T-tapes, which is the annual T-tapes. And I didn't see anything for perennials, but I'm pretty sure it kind of mixes with both together. But these components we always pay them separately. And then on top of that, we have the mulching, which is applied to pipelines. When you open trenches, you have to put mulch on the top to prevent erosion. And also we put mulch on the side of the high tunnels when there's disturbance. So these are the ones that we use the most in urban scenarios, but NRCS does have a lot of practices. So we have, I think, over 200 practices. We have composting facilities, gutters, we call it roof and gutters. Let me see, let's think for engines. So for bigger farms, I think those make more sense, but we can always go over. I always say, let me go to your farm, let me take a look, and we can sit down and I'll tell you which practice is. So when it comes to eligibility, everybody has to contact the Farm Service Agency, which is the FSA, and they're the ones that do the eligibility paperwork for us. What we have to complete is the data worksheet, which it tells us If this is an entity, okay, what is the name of the entity, all the information, and also another form that was the same form applied for another person in the entity that is the responsible person to sign the contract. We do the members information. This is more for businesses. If you're an individual, you don't have to complete a 901, but it tells us this is the names of the people that have any shares in the company. And if you are a non-for-profit, you still have to complete it just to show us this is the person that's going to sign, has signature authority, and it has 0% of shares. Then for the average justice gross income, this is one that some of the information I just learned this past week, and I'm really happy that I know now. For average justice gross income for most businesses is if they make more than $900,000 a year, they don't qualify. But for non-for-profits that we all know that they can have 2 million, 3 or more in their bank, the AGI that they have to pay attention to is the unrelated business taxable income. And that information, if you can't find it in your taxes, you can find it in this website, guidestar.org, that you can create an account for free, and you can go, when you get in the website, you put your name and then scroll down on the right side, and you will see a form that says 990. And that will tell you if your unrelated business taxable income is 0 or, it's less than $900,000. And most non-for-profits should qualify for programs. The next one is highly durable land. Most people say, why are we completing this form? And it's because of the Food Security Act. We have to make sure that we are not implementing practices in wetlands. And that's why this form has to be completed. The next one is the concurrence, practice concurrence, which is the owner concurrence. If you are leasing the land, then you're the owner of the land, or if it's New York, in this case, New York City or Great Thumb, has to agree to you implementing these practices. So if it's a high tunnel, cover crop, whichever practices they are, they have to look at the form and say, yes, we are okay with you implementing them in the land. And then you have to complete, once you get pre-approved for the application, you have to give us your direct deposit. Most people that I have talked to have asked me, do I really need an account? Do you cut checks? We don't cut checks. We cut that. I think we haven't been since 2005. So it's very important that the person has an account to do this direct deposit. Oh, and this information, we are not going to just let you, here you go and complete it yourself. I'm more than willing to sit with people and go through the forms, because some of them can be, difficult to complete if you haven't seen them before. Once you complete them once, you know what to do the next time. But I'm always willing to do them with you. And once this is completed, you don't have to keep doing it every time. So let's say you want to apply it every year for another high tunnel because you have a lot of land. There's 2 of them, I believe, you have to update. That's it. Everything else stays the same unless something changes. And that's a good thing. And this link on the bottom is for the forms. So if you're curious to see, how these forms look like, you can go to this website, which is the Farm Service Agency website, and it will give you the latest forms, the latest date, because they change every year, they update them. And this is my contact information, and also Joanna Pontino, she's the program technician for Farm Service Agency. So she will be your contact person for the eligibility forms. But please, if you have any questions, you don't feel comfortable completing by yourself, let me know and I will be more than happy to help you.
Thanks, Liz. Did you have any more information to share with us before I invite Elena to speak?
I do not. Let me see, because I think I put a comment in one of my notes here. Oh, crop rotation. That's what I wanted to mention in this picture. We have to make sure with high tunnels that we do crop rotation. Some people think that they can keep doing tomatoes or whatever other crop every year. And then by the 3rd year, they start having disease. If that's something that you really want to do, you should do the movable high tunnel, which it will I don't know if some of you have seen it. The high tunnel you can drag it to the next footprint, but you have to make sure that if the high tunnel is 50 feet long, then you have to have another 50 feet on the other side to be able to do that. But in that case that you have the space and you would like to keep using the same crop in the high tunnel, then that would be your best option. And that's it. I think I don't have anything else. And if anybody has any questions, and I try to make this as simple as possible, because like I say, we have a lot of processes and it's a little bit difficult, but I wanted to make sure you have the information. If any questions, I will be more than willing to go and visit your farm.
Thank you so much. Yes, please add your questions to the chat. I want to invite Elena from Garden of Happiness to tell us a little bit about that space, a little bit about the high tunnel that they have there, and the process in building it, in getting the program from NRCS, and as much as you know about it. I'm also going to share a couple of photos that I took just last week at Garden of Happiness.
Okay, thank you so much, Claudia. Hi, everyone. My name is Aleyna Rodriguez. I am the Executive Director for the Mary Mitchell Family and Youth Center, but I have been working with the Garden of Happiness for, oh my goodness, maybe like 7-8 years now, probably a little bit more. I met Karen Washington in my sophomore year of college, knew nothing about gardening. She introduced me all to it. And I remember when I was pregnant with my first child, we were actually out in the garden trying to measure the space out for this beautiful high tunnel that we have at the site. So I just wanted to come along. I did speak with Karen to get a lot more of the details that I didn't have, to provide you with a personal experience that Garden of Happiness experienced with getting a high tunnel at the garden. So we are located in the Bronx on Prospect Avenue, very close to the New York Botanical Garden and the Bronx Zoo. And we have a lot of neighbor gardens near us as well. So our high tunnel has been up now for almost 4 years. And we are currently growing tomatoes, serrano peppers that go towards the Bronx hot sauce, and a mix of herbs. And I believe this year they're doing basil and Mexican herbs. And everything is being, hopefully if Claudia is able to show the pictures, I forgot to bring pictures, but we are growing in the ground, and you'll be able to see like these makeshift beds where the soil is slightly raised. Where the soil is slightly raised, and that's where we plant along. They have also put in strings on the pictures that Liz was showing earlier was actually perfect, of like the beams that kind of curl across, of strings to help trellis the tomatoes up. Yes, that help to trellis the tomatoes up. That keeps them off of the ground. As we know, tomatoes can get like very wild. So this helps us to get as much fruit from the plants, and also making sure that it's not just all over. Our high tunnel is aluminum steel, and I want to say it was a process. Garden of Happiness luckily had Karen Washington, who has high tunnels at her farm in Rise and Root in upstate New York. So they kind of had the background of building and understanding it. But when I went there with Bronx Cleanup, Ursula Chance was there with me, and we're just trying to read the instructions and figuring out, because each pole has to be a certain amount of feet away. It had to be a certain amount of feet in. We had to remove 6 feet of soil from our dedicated spot. And it took a lot of work. And it ended up like being like a couple of volunteers from the garden, and then it grew because Karen saw that it was a lot to ask. So we were able to get the Parks Department to come, Bronx Green Up, and a lot of community residents and garden members to come and put this system up. But it worked out at the end, and it was great. But I would just keep that in mind as you're planning to have volunteers that are ready to like do some heavy lifting, a lot of digging, and just making sure that everything is accurate. I do remember that, as you can see, like these poles, they have to be so precise because the other pieces have to fit in correctly. So I'm just gonna like really emphasize that you have to be very patient and like, you know, really just work with it. But it's very precise and to the T. And that was something that was eye-opening for me because I was just used to growing in the beds that are at the garden, pots out of my fire escape. So this was a whole new world that I got thrown into. But it was great. It was exciting. And then just to give you some more background, Karen had to go, and there's Karen Washington, yay. She had to go through the process, like Liz was saying, of getting the approval and making sure that the owners were also a part of that process. And Garden of Happiness is a parks garden. So when Karen was starting the process, she realized that Garden of Happiness was listed as a residential site and not as a garden. So there was another hurdle thrown in front of them to figure out, like, after all these years it's been a garden, like how come it was never registered that way? So she had to fix that first with the Department of Buildings through the city to correct that. And then to get Green Thumb on board, which I'm pretty sure like they were eager. They were also there with us and supporting and all that. When I spoke to Karen to get the pricing at this time, when they built it, it was about 2,600, she informed me, for this high tunnel that we did. And I believe that included everything from the structure and the plastic covering over it. And I'm not sure if we have pictures, but like now, like Liz was saying, like sometimes, you know, with time, the plastic can get torn, and we already have like patches that we had to repatch because it was either pierced, something went through it, it was torn. So there's those repairs that had to happen just in the short 4 years. And then because we're an urban garden, as we know, we have those little four-legged critters that like to be all about, from rats and cats. So in our high tunnel, when we raise it up, you would see that we have not the chicken wire, but the plastic fencing that goes along the barrier. So when you lift it up, it still allows for that air circulation to come in, but it prevents the cats and the rodents from coming into the space. And then we also have the back and the front doors that can lock, but most of the times those are also open. And then the garden has decided, because we have many garden members at the Garden of Happiness, but we decided to just keep it to 3 gardeners that help to maintain this space. So it's not a free for all of anybody planting whatever they would like inside the space. And it allows us to contain like who's going in, who's coming out, who's harvesting, what's being harvested. So it allows us to better track what's happening in that space. And that's just something to keep in mind as well. Let's see what else. It took about, to put everything together with all the volunteers that we had and like the planning, it took about 2 weeks for us to do. And Garden of Happiness is, it's a fair, I would say, like compared to some gardens I've been to and like urban farms that can be larger, it's like a medium-sized garden, I would say. It's a little bit more narrow, but there's a lot of beds and you could really work with the space. And we even have like a green grassy field, which is nice. But it was hard to work in a space where there was like already beds built on the side. So we had to decide, what beds do we have to take out? Whose beds are we taking out? So it created a space where we had to have very much open conversation with all the community gardeners engaging in this space and not just coming and building this in and saying, okay, well, you know, you got to get a different plot or you have to go to a different garden. It was a conversation that was happening with all the gardeners and they all agreed that this was a benefit to the community. And then of course we were able to find them a bed in another part of the garden. But that's something to keep in mind if your space is smaller. If you have to remove beds or structures you already have, who's engaging with those spaces and having like conversation, I would encourage having conversation with them so that way they know the process that's going to happen. Let's see what else. else? I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Let's see. Oh, Karen also suggested, we don't have it in our garden, but having a thermometer inside to help you keep track of the temperature. Pretty much in the summer, the walls stay up throughout the entire summer, pretty much. But she said it's like a good way to like just keep track of the temperature inside and the plants that you're doing. And also the irrigation at Garden of Happiness, when still currently too, but they are starting to put in irrigation at the Garden of Happiness slowly. So we still use the hose connected to the hydrant across the street, running the hose over, filling up the rain barrels, and manually watering the plants. Hopefully that's going to change. Karen was informing me that the Garden of Happiness got accepted for a grant to do irrigation work in the garden. I'm not sure where that process is right now. I do know the gardeners are still using the manual method. And so far that works. I just really always advise covering the water because mosquitoes become a huge issue, especially for our center. We take all our kids to each of the gardens in our community, and we have about 4, and some of them are worse than others with the mosquitoes, but they could definitely be mitigated. But yeah, that's our high tunnel. I wish I was able to get photos of it in full bloom. It's really gorgeous in there, and it's always nice and warm during the winter. But if you ever want to visit, you can always let me know. Like I said, we're located on Prospect. Even if you look up Garden of Happiness, the address comes up. And most of the time our garden is open. And we also have chickens in the back if you want to take a peek. But if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer it. And if Claudia wants to share my information with anybody, I'm happy to answer any questions. And I can even connect with Karen to get the answers if I'm not able to answer it for you myself. Thank you.
Thanks, Elena. That was really wonderful to hear about the process. We have some more photos, I think, of Garden of Happiness. Yeah, that's the chicken coop in the back. And we're happy to take questions now, either about the NRCS programs and eligibility, and like maybe how competitive they are is something that I'm thinking about. And like maybe a timeline, how long does it take to start applying for these programs and get funding? Also just general benefits of having this high tunnel, like from experience. So I'll pause there and see if anyone has questions that they'd like to ask.
I do want to include the NRCS doesn't tell people how to, or participants, how to build these high tunnels. They have to come from the manufacturer. So when we do certifications in the field, when we go and check this practice, we ask you for a manual. So that's why it's very important that whoever installs them on their NRCS programs, that they follow the manual, because that's what we go by. We won't tell you like, oh, why you didn't install these braids, it doesn't matter if it's in the manual, it's not in the manual. We will never do that. It's like whatever is in the manual, that's what we will use. But the only things that you have to keep in mind is the list that I put at the beginning, that when you're shopping for a high tunnel, that those requirements that you see on the list are met. And if you have that, you should be fine. And I always said, please, if you're not in my area, because I noticed someone is from Sullivan County, send that list. If you get a quote from your manufacturer, your vendor, send that quote to NRCS office. They can take a look before you buy the high tunnel to make sure it meets our standards. I always ask for it because it's just easier to do it that way than then later be like, oops, we can't pay for it. So please always feel comfortable to contact your district conservationist or soil conservationist. Yeah.
Right. So
Timeline.
I was just going to say before, just a related question. It sounds like it has to come from a manufacturer. It has to be a kit. It's not something you can't put together like a DIY high tunnel. Yes. It has to come from
manufacturer. Yes. Mm-hmm. And I see that, how do I know if I qualify? Well, the first things I always say is, do you have the space? how big is it going to be? Do you have the sides requirements of 15 feet on all sides? So if you have that, that is like the first step to say, I can qualify. And that's when you call your local office and they will do a site visit and say, oh yeah, sure, we can, it is possible to do it here. Because one of the resource concern for high tunnels is plant health and vigor. So that's one of the things we will look at. You have any issues, you want to resolve any problems that you're having outside, you want to grow one of the crops that is just super difficult to grow without cover. And those are the things that we put on our notes and we put you in. So for applications, we accept applications all year round, but our deadlines kind of change. Sometimes it's in the summer, sometimes it's November. So I always tell people, if you want to apply, you're ready for it, let's do it now because we have to do a conservation plan. So every application, every application includes a conservation plan. So conservation plan means that we go to your farm, we take a look at all the problems or issues that are there, and we create a plan to show you, these are the practices you can do to resolve the problem. And in that plan, we're going to include as well the high tunnel. So timelines, always contact your office. This year, I believe it's going to be sometime in the summer. So as soon as you know that you would like to apply, as long as we have the application, we can do everything else later. It's not too sunny all day. It can be an issue if your plot is not sunny, because just most of the plants are not going to grow there. Maybe you can prune some trees that will allow at least 6 hours of sun. You don't need all 8. At least 6 will work. But yeah, if you have too much shade, it probably is just not going to work. Could you please share the link of the list again? Which list? Pre-high, you said a list that I sent?
Yeah, Liz. When you were speaking, you mentioned about a list of high tunnels that you recommend using. I think that's what you were saying, perhaps at the beginning.
Oh no, it's items that you have to keep in mind when you're ordering a high tunnel. So it will be the 6 mil plastic, the 12 to 14 gauge steel. That has to be Gothic style. Those are the ones that when you're shopping for a high tunnel, you should have on hand. That way you know, okay, this one meets my standards, okay, the NRCS standards.
Awesome. And I guess, Claudia, you said that you'll share the slides. I missed the first half. I was teaching, I'm sorry. But thank you for having this. This is excellent. So I guess I'll get that information from your slides. Thanks, Claudia.
And when it comes to suppliers and vendors, we don't recommend any. What I always said is like, I can tell you the ones that I have revised and the ones that really look good and the ones that are not so good. So it depends. Whichever you like, you're always welcome to send us pictures. You can send us the quote and we can take a look and say, yeah, this will definitely meet our standards. And I will tell you more than that. I'll say, well, those don't last too long. It meets our standards, but might not last a long time. So I will always mention those things. And you can buy, that's a good one. I don't know if that's the question that Lena had, but you can buy your high tunnel from anywhere in the United States, as long as it meets our standards. You just have to be very cautious that some companies will say to you, it meets NRCS standards. Even though NRCS has an office in every single state and pretty much every single county, well, not all counties, like one office can cover 5, like I cover 7 counties. But you always have a representation of NRCS. Some states are a little bit different and they require a little bit different things. Why? I don't know, but that's how it is. And in the South might be different because they don't get to know, but we do. So we have to be very cautious about all those things. Oh, and some companies will say, like a big banner on the website, meets NRCS standards. So just be careful. Don't trust them. Will you send us the links? Yep. For the size, Barbara, for the size of the high tunnel, it depends the soil. Most soils that I've seen is 15 feet on all sides of the high tunnel, from back and sides. They have to be covered. Yes, we're sharing all the slides. Does NRCS, oh, why isn't it scrolling? Oh, Hazel, absolutely. When we do conservation planning, it's not just us saying, hey, this is what you're going to do. We always ask the farmer, will this, because I will give you what I recommend. I will show you what the list looks like, and you just say, yeah, no, this is not possible. Is any other practices? Can we add other stuff? We always do conservation planning with the input of the customer. Why? Because if I give you what I want, you're probably not going to implement it. So we have to make sure that anything that we put in the conservation plan is something that will be feasible for the farmer.
But it's NCRS that actually types up the plan.
Yeah, we
And
do.
then that
Yes.
gets inserted to your application.
That is added in our system, yes. And then I have it's a really nice format actually that tells you exactly the practices, the timeline, all these things. Yeah, that will be us, absolutely.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
And NRCS is actually one of the agencies under USDA. Yeah. I just heard when you say USDA, so we are, they want us to make us the same, but we are different agencies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So outside of the footprint of the high tunnel between that and the other plots is what I meant. Yeah. No, I think that I answered, Barbara, I answered the question. Yes, 15 feet on both sides. Yep. Yes. And in some cases, people put perennial crops in those spaces, like asparagus, strawberries, something that is really gonna cover. You cannot put these crops all the way against the tunnel. Just because the snow is gonna fall in that section, you need a space for it and you need to walk around it to maintenance the high tunnel. So those areas that are not in production, in perennial production, I would say, you have to have grass. Of course, the standard will recommend grass, but as long that is covered, it should be okay. And also depends the site. If you have a very erodible site, you might not be able to do crops. It might have to be all grass. But that's something that is determined by the conservation specialist. I think I answered all the questions.
Yeah, I think you did. I just have, I'm wondering about Garden of Happiness and still thinking about what you have been growing inside and what you're planning to continue growing in there. Can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. So I know this year they're going to be growing tomatoes, heirloom tomatoes. And by the way, we get all of our starts from Rise and Root Farm in upstate New York. So through them, we buy the starts, and we're going to be putting heirloom tomatoes, the serrano peppers this year for the Bronx hot sauce. And then we'll be doing herbs. And I believe basil is one of the herbs, and various, I think it's either the chipiling or the other one that I always forget the name, and it has really a beautiful smell, but it's a Mexican herb that I believe they're going to be putting, because we have 4 rows in our high tunnel. So they're going to be putting that this year. And when I spoke to Karen, I believe like what they did was like rotate what was grown like the previous year. So nothing is being grown in the same spot. So I know last year they also did tomatoes, but they're switching completely where they were grown. So they're not growing tomatoes in the same row. So like where we have those strings at, that was from last year. So the strings have to be moved over to where the tomatoes would be grown. So they're gonna change it within the high tunnel itself. But those are what we're growing for this year. And they grow the serrano peppers for the Bronx hot sauce, which is really nice and exciting.
And I'm also wondering about irrigation, because you said that you hand water everything. And I know that NRCS has irrigation is one of the conservation practices. So I don't know if you know the reason why they didn't put drip irrigation in the high tunnel or not.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure why they didn't do it from the beginning. I know it's always been a constant conversation, and after Karen, I say retired from retiring, she had a project installed right before she left, which is, I don't know if you happen to see it when we did the tour, there was some spigots that were coming up around the garden to eventually allow for to allow for water to be accessed within the garden at these different points. But I believe that system still needs to be connected to the hydrant, which is across the street. But I know we are in the works now of going through the process for the grant to put drip irrigation in the garden. And that's something that's ongoing, and I'm learning that as I go. So I'm not 100% sure yet what the process has been, where fully that grant came from just yet. And I could get those details to share. But I know that process is happening, but it's not going to be until like the next growing season. So they're starting all the planning and all the paperwork now, but we're not going to see it happen this year at all.
For the irrigation system, probably, one thing I want to mention before that, the high tunnel that Garden Happiness has is with our old high tunnel standard. So that's another thing to keep in mind if you go to gardens and say, well, theirs look different than the one you're requiring me now. It's because we update standards every 5 years. So they will change, or they will, usually get more restrict than anything else. And for the irrigation system, probably it's because by the time we were implementing, I think actually the Bronx was the first contract, or the first high tunnel that we actually put in. And we didn't have an urban practice. We didn't have any urban, like specific items in our cost list. So to be able to implement irrigation systems and meet our standards is very difficult, because you don't have a well or public water. Everything comes from the hydrant. So we didn't have ways to, how can we collect this water, put it in a tank and send it to the system? Now we're looking at all those things, and it is possible. It's just that you might need a big tank, and we have to take a look. Can we do it? Is it feasible? Because we have rules, like we have to make sure we can irrigate the entire place in 22 hours, meeting our standards. So you might need a 2,000 gallon tank. So that's why we take a look and see if we are able to do it.
We have a question too about the cost of applying for this program. I think that's how I understood it. And then also about if it has to be soil-based crops, or if it can be used for soil-less growing.
No hydroponics. Everything has to be soil crops. For the cost, everything depends how much it's going to cost you, because we have a set cost. And I think I have another question similar to that he asked how much we pay. Let me show you again my presentation. You mind sharing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So here, what we pay for a square foot, let's do a smaller high tunnel. So per square foot up to 600 square feet is $9.12 for historical underserved. And I'm sorry, I didn't cover that. What historical underserved? Historical underserved is Hispanic, Blacks, Asian, Pacific Islanders, and I hope I don't miss anybody, and American Indians. So, and if you are in that category, you will be under HU. If you are not in any of those categories, then you get the regular cost, which is $7.60. When you purchase a high tunnel, you call a company to purchase a high tunnel. Some people, I will tell my farmers and stuff, like, they are amazing negotiating. I don't know how they do it, but they do it, and they get really good prices. So they are able to kind of have, because we used to be like a 75-25. We don't do that anymore. So it depends how much you pay. It could cost you $15,000 because you want to put heater system, or you want to add other things, more fancy things, electronic sides. The price will keep increasing. In that case, if we are only paying you $5,000, then you have $10,000 you have to cover. But if you have a simple high tunnel and it costs you $5,000, then your cost is covered 100%. So it depends how much it costs you. And that's the thing you have to keep in mind, which company you use. I know in Pennsylvania, they have better prices than New York, but it depends where you go.
And just to clarify, you have to purchase the high tunnel, submit all of your receipts, and then you get reimbursed from NRCS.
Thank you for saying that, Claudia. I missed that too. When you apply, just in a scenario, let's say Claudia comes to my office, we do the site visit, we determine, yes, high tunnel is feasible to do in this place. We create the conservation plan, and then if you get pre-approved, we complete a ranking that all is behind the scenes. You get let's say 2 months later, you get pre-approved, and I give you a call. They said you're good, you're pre-approved. We had to complete everything else that has to be done. Once you sign a contract, you have a whole year to implement the practice. If you have 7 different practices, then you have one. The first you have to complete at least one. And if it's a high tunnel, which includes critical area planting, that's the seed grass on the sides and the mulching, then you have to complete those 3 the first year because it's like a group practice. One of the issues I find is, like Claudia mentioned, we reimburse you, we'll say, how to explain this? We don't give money in advance unless you are in a different pod that we cannot do that. But you have to pay everything in yourself. You have to put all the money, you have to implement it, you have to find the people, install it. Once the practice is installed and we go and say, oh yeah, this meets NRCS standards, then we will pay you, we reimburse you. So we never release funds prior the implementation of the practice. The only time we do that is what we call advance payments. And when we go through that process, because it's a little bit different process, you only have 90 days to implement it. And that's something that people have to keep in mind, that it's like, can I do it in those 90 days? But it's those same things that we discuss when you're putting the application in to make sure, oh yeah, let's do an advance payments just because we don't have the financial capability of putting $6,000 out, or whichever amount. Did I answer the question, Claudia? And another thing is, you cannot implement the practice before you get a contract. All practices have to be implemented after you get a contract. If you do it prior to that, it doesn't qualify for reimbursement. And that's a question I get all the time, because people get excited, they go and buy everything. And I feel so bad when I say, I'm sorry, you can't, we can't do it.
Well, those were definitely all of the questions that we had in the chat, and it's exactly 7 o'clock. We're right on time. I'm going to stop recording